Go for it. Good morning. Thank you for participating in our remote meeting of the South Coast AQMD Legislative Committee. We have two formats for participation: Zoom web application as well as teleconference. Please silence your other communication devices, such as your cell or desk phone, so that there aren't any disruptions during the meeting. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for the committee members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. That means you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. After each agenda item, the legislative chair will announce public comment. Zoom video instructions for those who are using Zoom. If you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the raised hand button. If you're using Zoom on your smartphone, please tap the raise hand button on the bottom of the screen. For those calling in using the phone line, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to comment. Your name will be called when it is your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Speakers will be limited to a total of 3 minutes for the entirety of the item, and a countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Please note, you can hang up and or leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Please adhere to the speaker. I'm sorry, hold on. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being dropped from the meeting. That's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And I will call the Legislative Committee meeting to order and welcome all of you. Could you please make a roll call for presence to see who is present?
Of course. Good morning. I'm going to start off with Dr. Burke. Councilmember Buscaino.
Good morning. Here.
Senator Delgado. Supervisor Perez.
Good morning. Here.
Supervisor Rutherford. Here. And Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, here. Thank you. We expect Senator Delgado to join us. So if you would, what is that?
So can we have everybody mute their phones? Because I think that's what we're
Please
doing.
mute unless you are called upon to speak. Okay. Thank you. We will start with our updates first on federal legislative issues. And I'm going to ask our consultants to give an update on the written reports that they have contributed for this morning. So first up is Cassidy and Associates, and I see Mark online. Good morning, Mark. How are things out there in Washington?
Well, we'll find out in a couple of days, but it's good to see you. Good to see everyone. Thank you. In addition to the written report, I'll just give you a quick update. As I think I mentioned last time, we've been following some of the leadership races, caucus races, et cetera, in Congress. And just to close the loop on that, Representative Pete Aguilar was elected the caucus vice chair, which is a leadership position. So very good for our district. Obviously great for him. The Hispanic caucus had elections, and two of our members were elected chair and vice chair. Representative Ruiz from out in the desert, and Nanette Barragan from Los Angeles as vice chair. So that was helpful. And then in Orange County, Katie Porter was elected vice chair of the Progressive Caucus. So there are a number of caucuses that we are now well represented on in high spots, and that could be helpful. And we've been working with Derek and Lisa and the rest of the team to make sure that that's part of our strategy going forward, because that could be enormously helpful. The other two things I would mention, there are a number of things that haven't been resolved as Congress makes a dash to try to get home for Christmas. It's not looking great at the moment. The two big issues that we're following are the omnibus bill. As you know, Congress has not passed a single of their appropriations bills. So they're trying to do an omnibus or perhaps two minibuses. and attach a number of things to that. Actually, I think we're somewhat hopeful that will be done before they leave at the end of December. But I would say the issue that we're most focused on here that's I think useful is the Targeted Airshed Grant Program, the TAG program, which has been enormously useful for us. One of the issues is that the House of Representatives took it from 5 recipients up to 10 recipients. Obviously, without raising the money, that would mean, since we do very well, it could diminish our take. So we worked with Senator Feinstein, and Cassidy worked with Senator Murkowski, and together they were successful, I think, in turning that back. It's not final, but the sense we're getting from talking to the conferees is that we will stick to the 5 entities, which I think is very advantageous for South Coast. And just to remind you, this summer we received, I think, $37 million grant from TAG, was used for the Volvo truck program and other programs that we have. So it's very helpful. And we'll continue to monitor that. There had been a $5 million cap approximately on the TAG programs, and we worked with the senators to work with the conferees or to work with the EPA and got that cap lifted. So that was enormously helpful, I think, for South Coast. The second thing we're following, I think we're all following closely, is the COVID relief, the so-called stimulus package that one hopes will be attached to this omnibus bill ultimately. And as you all know, the holdups right now are a dispute over funding for state and local governments, and on the other side, liability relief for small business. And that's been controversial. So just so everyone's aware, one of the issues that has mattered to us is special districts and whether we would be eligible, if this happens, whether we would be eligible to receive funds. So we've been working with Congressman Garamendi and others to try to make that happen. That is still an ongoing negotiation, and the entire relief bill, as you all know, is still an ongoing negotiation. I hope we get there, but it's simply not clear at the moment. So we will keep you up to date as things change. Anyway, that's my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mark this morning? I do have one. Is the Targeted Airshed Grant, isn't it reserved for non-attainment areas?
Right, but they were going to, but it was limited to just 5 recipients, and they were going to make it less restrictive, and so it was going to go up to 10. And so we wanted to make it the most severe, and so it was important for us. Now, if they wanted to make it a larger number and also increase the amount, we would be fine with that, but that's not what they were proposing.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mark. I think see Supervisor Perez with his hand up. Supervisor Perez, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mark, for your update. Speaking of Congressman Raul Ruiz, obviously he's a friend out here, and it's great that he's in that role. But he did introduce legislation related to the Salton Sea, and out here in the area, obviously with our AB 617 meetings that we're having with our CECs and talking about the emission reduction plans that are going on. One of the major areas that continuously comes up, or issues that continuously comes up, is the issue of dust suppression around the Salton Sea and concerns around PM 2.5, obviously PM 10. And so out here, potentially, perhaps we don't have all the emissions that are coming in or that are here through smog, right? But we do have major dust storms. And I think anything that we can do to be helpful and supportive moving forward with Raul Ruiz's legislation that he's working on, I think that we should. Obviously, it'll be helpful to my area here specifically, but just overall AQMD as a whole. So just want to flag that for you, Mark. And I'm hoping that maybe you can have that conversation with him if you haven't had that already.
Sure, and Supervisor, thank you for that. I would say that there is some language in the omnibus that he has gotten in, and I will send it through Derek and Lisa to you so that you can take a look at it.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Not seeing any. We'll move on to Gary Hoitzma from Carmen Group. Good morning, Gary.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair. Glad to be with you today. Just a quick update on the overall status of things in the Congress. Just to echo what Mark said, basically, the House has passed this 1-week extension of the stopgap spending bill to December 18th, and now the Senate is prepped today to break a filibuster there on the Senate floor today and pass that later today to December 18th. So we've got through next week, and a lot of the talk in town is that it could be extended further than that. As Mark mentioned, there's still these differences on the COVID relief bill, which they want to attach to this omnibus. And as Mark said, the liability provisions and the state and local provisions, one supported strongly by Republicans, the other supported strongly by Democrats, is the big holdup. There are other issues involved as well, but those are the ones we're watching most closely because we have an interest in whether this state and local funding will get into the bill or not. So we're watching that very closely. Right at the moment, it just looks very negative today, but the hope is that it will improve going into next week as they get closer to the next deadline. So that's where we are there. Also, just looking at the overall picture there, I think with the Republican and Senate leadership coming out of the election, we see that it's staying the same pretty much on both sides, with Leader Pelosi on one side and Mitch McConnell on the other side. And we're waiting for these two elections in Georgia to determine who will control the Senate. That will be a very big issue in terms of how the Congress looks next year, and whether the Republicans can control the Senate and keep the filibuster in place. So we'll be watching that very closely. That's my quick report today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions or comments on Gary's report? Not seeing any. Supervisor Perez, your hand is still up. Do you have something else, or is?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay,
I'll
great.
lower my hand now.
Okay. Next, we'll go to Cassidy and Associates, and Angela Ebenar is with us this morning. So can you give us an update on your report, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Just going to do a quick update on the president-elect's transition and administration choices and the energy bill that they're working on in the Senate. So we still don't have a Secretary of Energy or EPA administrator, but some of the top candidates include California's Mary Nichols for EPA administrator, who, as you know, was the chair of the California Air Resources Board. Also, Governor Jay Inslee from Washington. And another name that we've heard is Heather Toney, who is the senior director of MOM's Clean Air Force and also former regional administrator in the Southeast region. For DOE, some of the names we're hearing is former DOE Secretary Ernie Moniz, who was there under the Obama administration. Also, Elizabeth Sherwood Randall, who is a former Deputy Secretary of Energy under Obama and a current professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And also another Californian that could be considered is Arun Majumdar, who's an engineering professor at Stanford currently, but was the first director when DOE established ARPA-E. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that stuff for you guys. And then an update on the energy bill in the Senate, which they've been working on for a few weeks. So House and Senate committee staff are trying to finalize the energy bill this week with the goal of moving it with whatever the packages they end up passing next week, which we're guessing is some sort of omnibus with some sort of COVID relief. Senators Murkowski and Manchin have received assurances from leadership that the energy bill will be included in the package if Senate ENR House Natural Resources and House Energy and Commerce can agree to text. They've been working on it for a few weeks and hope to wrap up negotiations by the end of this week. The text is nearly final, so we'll share that when we have it. But the major titles include energy storage, nuclear storage, carbon capture, carbon removal, and energy efficiency. It'll also likely include a short-term reauthorization of the DERA program at current levels, so 100 million per year. And one title that they're still working on, still negotiating, is the Transportation Electrification Grant Program. So it has a chance to get in. It would authorize $2.5 billion per year for grants for electric vehicle infrastructure and equipment. So we will be sure to update you when we have final text and update you on whether that program was included. That's it for me.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like we may have some exciting news out of the energy bill. We'll see. Any questions or comments for Angela? I don't see any hands up. Okay. Any public comment on the federal report?
No public comment.
No public comment. Okay, we'll move on to the state reports. And Paul Gonzalez is with us from Gonzalez and Sons. The Gonzalvi, I guess, is how we refer to you. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I just want to provide a, excuse me, a quick, brief verbal update in addition to my written report. As we all know, Senator Holly Mitchell was elected to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, becoming one of the 5 queens of Los Angeles County and completing the historic all-female Board of Supervisors there in LA County. And with Senator Mitchell's departure from the Senate, and being that she was chair of the Senate Budget Committee, it has created a domino effect, or what I like to call musical chairs within the Senate. Being chair of the Senate Budget Committee is a highly sought after position and very likely will be filled by another senator who is also a chair of another committee. So for example, if Senator Anthony Portantino, our good friend, Mr. Portantino, who's the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, should he be appointed budget chair, then now the Senate Appropriations Chair position needs to be filled, and so on and so on and so on. So the musical chairs are just getting started within the Senate. The Assembly will also see some changes just because of the number of new members who were just sworn in earlier this week. And we expect both houses to announce committee chairs and memberships within the next few weeks, and we'll make sure we keep you guys apprised on those. Additionally, last Friday, Assembly Speaker Rendon appointed Assembly Member Eloise Reyes as the new Assembly Majority Leader, making her the first Latina to hold that position. She's replacing former Assembly Majority Leader Ian Calderon, who decided not to run for re-election, and we're really looking forward to working with Assemblymember Reyes in her new position. And lastly, I just wanted to mention earlier this week, Governor Newsom announced that Jim DeBoo will be joining his administration. Jim is he's a longtime Sacramento politician around here. He's been a lobbyist, he's been chief of staff, he's been around the building for a very long time. And thus far, all that has been publicly announced on his role is that he will be a quote unquote senior member of the team. However, we've been hearing plenty of rumors that he will be taking over for Ann O'Leary, the governor's chief of staff, who is rumored to be leaving for the Biden administration. So on a personal note, Jim is a very great guy. Jim DeBoo is a fantastic person. He's a close family friend, and he actually went to high school with my brother, Jason. So we've known him for a very long time, and we look forward to working closely with him in his new position. And with that, I would just like to wish everybody a happy and healthy holidays and a happy new year. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Joe, do you have a question? I don't know if your hand was up. Councilman Buscaino?
No, I was thinking, thanks, Paul, for the update. With the announcement of Attorney General Becerra heading to serve under President-elect Biden's administration, what's the talk up there of filling that AG position, and how will that impact that decision impact our mission here at AQMD?
You know, Councilmember, we haven't heard a lot on that position yet. Obviously, there's going to be, with the new Biden administration, a lot of moving around and new appointments. We have rumors of Senator Padilla possibly going to fill, Vice President-elect Harris's position. So we're going to have a lot of movement within our state elected officials. So it's hard to really say at this point how it's going to affect us, not knowing who's in the running yet really at this point, especially for Javier Becerra's position. But at this point, I think it's fair to say it's going to be, somebody we know, somebody that we're friends with, and we'll make sure we reach out to them immediately and start working with them closely from the get-go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
My pleasure.
Well, how is that position filled? Is it an appointment then, or is there an election?
It will be an appointment.
It will be an appointment by
It
the
will be an
by the
appointment
governor.
by the governor, and with an election, they'll have to run for re-election in the next
In
election cycle.
the next round. Okay. And Supervisor Perez has a question. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Just not necessarily a question, just I'm not sure if we do this already, if it's part of our protocol, but now knowing that Luis Reyes is the majority leader, it'd be a good idea. And also because she's down the street from us within the Redlands, San Bernardino area. I'm hoping that we write letters congratulating folks for their new positions on behalf of AQMD. And, let them know that we're going to be talking to them in the future as well. We look forward to working with them. So that type of correspondence, I think, would be good. Just want to put that out there. Not sure if we do that already.
Great, good idea. Yes, we will ask our staff to do that on all of these new appointments. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Reach out. Yeah, very good. So seeing no other questions or comments, I'm going to move on to the next report from Gerald Cook with Resolute, the Resolute firm. Gerald? There he is.
Thank you very much. Standing in for David Quintana, he unfortunately was sick, but he wants me to emphasize that it is not COVID. In addition to our written report, piggybacking off of the previous question, we wanted to give some updates on the appointments that may be coming in the governor's office. First, following up on the question about Attorney General Becerra moving into the Biden administration, names that we've heard so far floated are Assemblymember Rob Bonta, who was in the running when Attorney General Harris first was elected to the Senate, was a potential name that was coming up to fill the seat before then Representative Becerra got the nomination. He has been running a quiet campaign even before the official announcement came. We've also heard Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg has also been putting his name in, putting out feelers to see if he can potentially get the nomination. Other names that have come up, Assemblymember David Chu, Assemblymember Ash Kalra, and Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez, as well as current SFDA Herrera. I think those names, based on what we can tell, have less of a chance, but potentially could get the nod as well. They're all sort of in the mix. A name that we wanted to discuss was Leanne Randolph being appointed to chair of the Air Resources Board, replacing Mary Nichols. She's a former PUC commissioner as well as a secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency. What we've been discussing with our contacts is that we may see a shift in her leadership of CARB. There's some hope that she will see some support for interim solutions, which Mary Nichols has sort of backed away from in favor of long-term funding of EVs and other solutions. So we may see CARB reorient and reinvigorate itself towards what they were referring to as interim solutions of natural gas and other biomatter energy. The last name we wanted to discuss, you may have seen the governor's looking to appoint Dee Dee Myers as his new head of GoBiz. She would be coming in to replace Lenny Mendonca, who stepped down from the position a while ago to deal with personal issues. She is formerly of the Clinton administration, former press secretary, and since then has, in addition to other roles, been the corporate communications director for Warner Brothers. And with that, I think those are all of the potential updates that we have, or potential nominees that we have for the administration.
Great, thank you very much. Lots of changes going on. So really interesting changes in people and changes in policy. So it'll be an interesting new year. All right, let's move to Ross Buckley from California. Does anyone have any questions of Gerald? Sorry, I didn't ask that. Looks like we're set. I don't see any hands up. Okay, we'll move to Ross Buckley from California Advisors. Good morning, Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, the new legislative session started on this past Monday. Hard to believe it's December and we're introducing new bills and legislature starting again. But that's, I guess, a good sign because 2020 is almost over. The swearing in session happened under obviously different circumstances than in years past, given everything that's going on with COVID. The assembly was sworn in the Golden One basketball arena down the street from the Capitol to help provide more room for physical distancing, which was interesting to see, the swearing in, the first organizing session not be in the Capitol, but it's times we're living under right now. The Senate stayed in the Senate chambers, but they limited the amount of guests that could be in the chambers. Obviously, today is usually a very big family day where, new members are celebrating with their families, and it was kind of sad to see and the assembly played a family slideshow as kind of a nice touch to that. With the start of the new session, we've started to see obviously new bills be introduced. As you'll recall, bills were a big part of the conversation this past year. Given the kind of short timelines with starting session, stopping session, members were forced to cut down on bills, and they really wanted to keep them COVID focused or kind of time sensitive. Now, this caused a lot of heartburn because that was a fairly subjective rule for members to follow. And depending on what side of the issue you were, you thought members did a really good job of narrowing bills, or you thought they did a really bad job of narrowing bills. But there's caused a lot of fighting in between the houses and within each house. So something to keep an eye on for this next year. This first week, we've seen 99 assembly bills introduced and 74 Senate bills. So 173 pieces of legislation have already been introduced in this first week. That doesn't count the numerous resolutions or constitutional amendments that were also been introduced. So the first wave of bills is here. We'll see more bills introduced before the holiday break, and then it will really ramp up, January, February for bill introduction. We've heard the Assembly is going to try to limit how many bills get sent over to the Senate. As I just mentioned, a lot of inter-house tension last year because the Senate didn't think the Assembly was doing a good enough job at limiting bills. So they weren't setting bills, and then the Assembly didn't set the Senate bills. So I think there's going to be an effort to try to solve that early on. Again, we've heard it's 10 or 12 bills per member. At least that's going into the year. That's what they're thinking about. We'll see how that plays out as the year goes on. We haven't heard such a directive from the Senate just yet, but this will definitely be something to watch just as the year progresses. And that completes my update on the new legislative session. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Are there any questions or comments for Ross on Ross's report?
Madam
And
Chair, I don't have a
yeah.
question for Ross, but I do want to raise an issue that wasn't addressed, something that I know that you're well familiar with, if I may.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Thanks. So as people may or may not know, the governor announced just 2 days ago the replacement for Mary Nichols as the chair of the California Air Resources Board, Leanne Randolph, I believe. And I believe she starts January, is that right, Mayor Mitchell?
Right. Mary's term will end December 31st, and will be a transition where she will probably orient Leanne to the new functions.
And then their first board meeting will be in February, I understand.
Right. There's no meeting in January.
Right. Okay. And then the other appointments also being made to the Air Resources Board include our own board member, Gideon Krakoff, who will be replacing Mayor Mitchell. And again, I guess I'm sure he'll start January, but his first board meeting will be in February. And then we know that Dr. Bombs was also recently reappointed. And then there were 2 new appointments from the Bay Area and the San Joaquin Valley. And I just wanted to sort of mention that because I think you're starting to see a shift in the board, and I think it's going to be a good thing, frankly, for the Air Resources Board. Mayor Mitchell has been carrying the torch and the banner and being out front for quite some time, trying to lead our efforts to not only keep the tools that we have to try to get further emission reductions, but also trying to make sure that ARB is fulfilling its commitment. And I don't know, Mayor, if appropriate or not, but maybe you want to just give a brief update on perhaps the chair's acknowledgement with regards to what's going on here in our basin.
Right. We had a meeting yesterday, and what was brought up was the mobile source strategy document and funding plan for mobile sources. And there was an admission in the mobile source strategy document that we are not going to meet the 2023 ozone requirement under the Clean Air Act, and probably won't meet the 2031 deadline either. And so I know our staff has been working with the staff at CARB to see how that pans out. I don't know what happens if we can't meet it and we won't be able to introduce a SIP that meets it. I mean, do we just subject ourselves to penalties or what? I maybe Wayne, you can follow up on that, because I mean, maybe what with the new chair at CARB, and it is indicated that she may be interested in more interim near-term solutions for us. Something that came up under the funding plan yesterday too was these near-term solutions. I made a motion to include the low NOx 0.02 gram truck in the HVIP funding, seconded by Alex Sheriffs from San Joaquin. And those were the only 2 votes that voted in favor of it. So I've been fighting this battle for almost since I got on the CARB board, and it's just been, knocking my head against the wall every time we bring it up. So Wayne, what happens if we can't meet the 2023 clean air deadline? What do we expect next? You're muted.
Sorry, too quick on the buttons. So there's a number of potential outcomes. EPA has to first, and I'm going to look to Barbara and to Phil to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. But there's a number of potential actions, and we've certainly talked about the potential for outcomes. EPA would first have to make a finding of failure to attain. That gives us an opportunity to submit a plan. EPA would then possibly review that plan. If we fail to submit a plan, then once EPA makes the determination that we fail to do that, a clock begins. And once we submit a plan, the clock stops, but there are other factors that go on. Barbara, would you like to put some detail on this?
Okay. For severe and extreme ozone attainment areas that fail to timely attain, one measure that's required to happen is the imposition of fees on major stationary sources. And that is pursuant to Section 185 of the Clean Air Act. And it requires the stationary sources to either cut back their emissions to 80% of what they were in the attainment year, or to pay a fee of $5,000 per ton on the emissions that are in excess of 80%. What that translates to in terms of what $5,000 has grown to since it was put in the Act in 1990. It's more like $9,000 now, I believe. Sanctions are not triggered automatically by failure to attain, but they would be triggered if EPA makes a finding that we failed to implement an approved implementation plan. And they would also be triggered, I think this may be where Wayne was going, if EPA directs us to submit another attainment plan with a new deadline, and we submit that plan, but it's not approvable, or if we fail to submit that plan. Right. And then finally, there's a requirement that the extreme area that fails to attain implement an economic incentive program. And that is pursuant to some guidance that EPA issued about 20 years ago. So we'll have to take a look at that and see if we have any existing programs that might qualify if this should come about. The other alternative is to see if there could be some kind of legislative relief for areas that have to rely on federal sources to attain the standards.
So right now, Madam Chair, we're in the process of looking at potential legislative fix in DC. So this is all internal. We're sort of contemplating what that might look like. We're also looking at going after EPA, and we've discussed this before the board, and certainly have authorization to do so. For us, the question has been one of timing. We're also considering what are some of the responsibilities of the state as well, and we'll be bringing to the board relatively soon some recommendations in terms of how we want to proceed.
I will mention that Chair Nichols prefaced her comments yesterday on the mobile source strategy with criticism of the way the federal government has addressed federal sources of our emissions. So she may be, if she gets the US EPA position, may be able to provide some assistance and crack down a little bit harder on federal sources, so we can see what happens there. Okay, any other comments or questions about this report, the state report? Okay, let's go to public comment on the state reporting.
There's no public comment.
Okay, next we'll move to the only action item on our agenda, which is on this federal bill, HR 7822. We're looking at this for the second time. It came before us and then was sent back to us from the board when the board took a look at it to get more detail on what the amendments are that we would like to see in this bill. And staff has provided a copy of the bill attached to this report with all of the suggested areas that they want to work on with the author. And it isn't specific language, it's more broader than that. So they've put it in the margins of the marked up bill so we can see what it is that staff will be working on. So I'll ask Lisa to give a report.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell and board members. I'm bringing back HR 7822, the Public Health Air Quality Act of 2020. It was introduced by Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. The Congresswoman had reached out to South Coast AQMD as well as other air quality agencies and organizations seeking input to build a stronger bill. The intent of the bill is positive, as she wants to make improvements for air monitoring and toxics, and there is funding in the bill. However, as Chair Mitchell pointed out, there are several areas, 15 in total comments that we have on her bill. And at this point, I guess I can offer either to go through each of those areas or just kind of provide some general comments of our areas of concern. Chair Mitchell, should I go through all 15 or just provide the general?
Just, why don't we start with general comments, your general comments, and then if any of our committee members want to dig more specifically into parts of it, we can do that.
Sounds good. Terrific. So our first observation is that it's very difficult to amend federal law. So it's critical to create a strong policy framework that will require the US EPA to promulgate rules and guidance. The rules and guidance can be updated with broad stakeholder input, and South Coast AQMD and our sister agencies are positioned and familiar with that process. So that's one of our first points. Second, it would be beneficial to expand the National Ambient Air Monitoring Network, but those efforts may not necessarily serve the local communities in relation to air toxics. So targeted air toxics monitoring normally requires very specific equipment to address potential issues from those types of facilities and will vary from community to community. So adding some steps for having the regional measurements from the air monitoring stations to support the localized efforts may have a stronger impact if we align those goals with local scale air monitoring for the specific types of facilities and issues. Next.
Hey, Lisa.
Yes?
I'm sorry. Maybe if I could just interject here for a moment. The reason that we're bringing this back was there was concern about the position that we were recommending. And we were taking the position previously of support with amendments. And there was concern about that. Let's just jump to the chase. I thought the position that we're now recommending is work with author. And hopefully that will address the concerns of the members. And if that's it, then I don't think we need to go through everything again. So I would just offer that up for consideration.
Well, let me put that to the committee. Is that sufficient that we work with author? Are there still comments about sending this recommendation to the board? I see Supervisor Perez has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I was just wondering, remind us, what were the concerns from members? Because I don't remember.
I think Supervisor Rutherford, I don't want to speak for you, but as I recall, your main concern was the federal government imposing requirements at the local level. Is that right?
Yeah, my main concern was federal overreach. And of course, I have broad concerns with fence line monitoring in general, but also this bill wasn't specific to us. We don't really get anything out of it. But I'm comfortable working with the author. I think that gives us the opportunity to have conversations without saying we're supporting additional federal regulations, and also perhaps allows us to bring some of our expertise that this author or her staff might not have, given that our agency is just a little more up on things than many in the country. So I'm comfortable with work with author. I appreciate the staff withdrawing its recommendation otherwise.
Okay, good. Any other comments?
With that said, then I'd like to make the motion.
Motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Right, to work with the author, if that's what Supervisor Rutherford is good with as well.
Okay.
Second.
All right, let's just call a roll call vote on that. Are there any more comments from committee members? Nope, not seeing any. Let's have a roll call, please.
Dr. Burke? Councilmember Buscaino?
Yes.
Senator Delgado? Supervisor Perez?
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes. Okay.
Motion passes 4-0.
Passes. Okay, and that will go to the board then for approval. Thank you, Wayne, for interjecting, shortcutting a longer discussion. Okay. Is there any public comment on that issue, or HR 7822?
There is no public comment.
Nothing. Okay. Then we can go to, we have no other, is there any other business to come before this committee under item 4? And then public comment, general public comment. Anyone out there for general public comment?
There's no public comment.
No one. Okay. Then we can adjourn. Our next meeting is January 15th. So I wish you all a happy Christmas, although I'll probably see you at some other meetings before January 15th.
Judith, can I just ask, is this your last meeting as our chair? Or do we see you in January?
Let's see. Well, I will be hold the AQMD seat until February 5th. That will be my last meeting. So I assume I would stay in as chair until that point.
Well, then we'll celebrate you in January. I was going to do it now, but we'll celebrate you then.
Yes, good, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. I had the same concern, but
Okay.
thanks so much. Happy holidays, y'all.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
everybody.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
End recording.